down here to Kroger, give me another pop. Today is a sad and tragic day for our whole family. My dad's side. My grandpa and grandma, Lolan and Marjorie, never could pronounce her name. I think it's Marjorie. Lolan and Marjorie Redden, my grandpa and grandma was killed on this day in 1980 at approximately 6. They left her home in Verona, Kentucky, Gallatin County, northern Kentucky. They went to do some laundry for my grandma's mom. That would be my great-grandma, Stella Shepherd. And before they left, my grandpa went over to his baby daughter, Mary Ann, next door. And, you know, we're going down to the country. About an hour and a half later, Rockcastle County, Kentucky, they apparently hit a patch of ice at the 67-mile marker. Crossed the median, spun, and a tobacco truck hit them. My grandpa apparently, now why I'm using the word apparently, you know, in the real world you have to. Apparently my grandma was killed instantly, and my grandpa apparently lived 1 hour, but he stayed unconscious. The only relief through all this, my dad was wanting to see the car. The car was still at the service station. Mom didn't think he could take it because we still had the funeral to go to. And one relief we got, it paid us to go there because we found in the back seat, we found my grandma always wore this knitted cap. We found a hole in it about that big. Yeah, in the back seat. So that proved to my dad that my grandma did not suffer. He was worried about that. And that helped. The entire car, I think it was an AMC Pacer, I believe. It was all glass. Anyway, picture of the car, the rear, left rear, it was all crushed in. And the force was so great, it actually bent my grandma's seat. Yeah, actually bent my grandma's seat, and she landed in the back where we found her knitted cap. He did not. My grandpa literally witnessed this at a corner. I think he was doing plumbing. He was a plumber. He was doing plumbing work. I don't know where at, but he was near probably at a store. He's right near the intersection, at an intersection. These ladies went to stop in a Ford Pinto. A truck coming behind him, he witnessed this, lost its brakes and slammed into this Ford Pinto with those two lady occupants. They had their seatbelts on, and he said you could literally hear him screaming. They panicked. They couldn't get their seatbelts loose. He said their bones cooked just like kindling. You know, they burn up. So he went home after work and took his knife and literally cut every seatbelt. He owned a couple cars. He cut every seatbelt out of every vehicle he had, because he witnessed two ladies burning up because they could not get their own seatbelts off in a Ford Pinto. And of course that eventually cost their lives. My grandpa apparently had most of his ribs broken from the steering wheel from the impact. What were they like? Well, my grandpa was orphaned. My grandma was the sweetest person on this earth. My mom reminds me of my grandma, very sweet. My grandpa, he could raise all kind of hell. He never talked, he yelled. Never forget one time, him cussing out Phil Donahue. Oh, God. It's on television. He was on television. And it was, I never forget that evil, I mean, he cussed him out. He just the way he was. He had a heart of gold. My grandpa would feed me faster than my own dad. If I was down and out right now, my grandpa would already be here with a 50-sack pound of potatoes. My grandpa did not believe even in his enemy going hungry, because he went hungry as an orphan. He had a heart of gold. I remember being nervous around him a lot when I was in the 70s when I was growing up. But I mean, you know, he's just the way he was, I mean. And he was a big joker. Oh, God. I never forget. He made a black Cincinnati policeman pulled him over one time. He got off work. Yeah. He was drinking a beer. See, my grandpa, he had to retire due to medical purposes, which I won't go into. And my cousin Don, we was talking about that at Kings Island. Always wondered about that. Union forced him to retire. Anyway, one time he got off work, my grandpa, late 60s. He'd been drinking a beer. Cincinnati cop pulled him over, police. And before he could pull him over, downtown Cincinnati, there's 4 or 5 rows of railroad tracks. So that gave my grandpa ample time to put the beer under he's in a truck, under his seat. He still had a thermos full of milk he hadn't touched yet. So he quickly unscrews the cap, pours that plastic cap full of milk, and sucks it about halfway down to hide his alcohol breath. Cincinnati police officer gets out of his cruiser. First, he said, "Good evening." He said, "How many beers have you had tonight, or this evening?" Grandpa looks at him and says, and I quote, when in the hell does a cow give beer?" He said, that Cincinnati police officer apologized 10 minutes to him. Really did. My grandpa was a no bullshit kind of guy. And you know, you didn't want to work for him. He would work you to death. He paid you good. You just that. He did not. You know, he hated. I witnessed this. He hated the guitar player. Oh, God. He said, "Ain't nothing sorrier." You know, in other words, they don't work by the sweat of their brow. There was nothing to nobody. You know, that's just the way he was, man. You know, he never talked. I've said that a million times. He yelled. Wasn't afraid of nobody. And he would just, I don't know, just best way to describe him, big joker. Oh, I'm gonna tell something that's a little dirty, what he did one time. One time my grandpa had a fender bender, I think it was downtown Cincinnati. It was ice out. He hit into this lady. So he gets out of his car. Now, if you got any, I'm gonna go ahead and tell what it is. You may want to watch this first before your kids, all right? Anyway, he gets out of the car and he'll exchange his license and insurance information with the lady. He said, "We both get out of the car. I'm gonna try to act like I'm him." There we go. We both get out of the car, and as we get right next to each other, approaching, he said, "We both hit that ice," and we said, "We're going down the speed of lightning." So and if he'd fall, you hurt. You know, I mean, we went down so fast, you brake stop. The only thing I knew to do at the speed of lightning was grab her. And when I say grab her, I'm talking about in the gutter, if you get my drift. He said I grabbed her, not to be naughty, just we both hit that ice and we was going down. You know, it would hurt you. We'd probably break an arm or you get hurt. He said I grab her and we lock. He says, as we lock, we're down like this, and we're stuck in that position. And, he just, at split second, I mean, you get hurt on ice. And, there's people sent to the emergency room when they got a skull fracture. I mean, ice is dangerous, people. Ice ain't nothing to play around with. They said that split second he grabs her and they lock. But you ought to heard him. I was 12 years old. Man, you ought to heard him told that. Not to be dirty. It's just that hell, he's both falling on ice. They won't get hurt. If I quit coughing my ass off, maybe I can tell this. Anyway, my grandpa and grandma always went to the garden at 3 a.m. Always. And I've always wondered why that was. Of course, they always, I think that's why I'm a night owl today. My grandpa and grandma, Lolan and Marjorie, Redden, Margie, never pronounce her name right. Anyway, they always went to bed at sunset or 6 o'clock. Always, just their way, away. And we're talking about the 1970s, and they would get up at 3 o'clock. I stayed all night over there one time, and I heard my grandpa crank the tractor up at 3 a.m. I went to look. I went to the grandfather clock. Now I was in a mobile home. I was in her my aunt's mobile home, and she had a grandfather clock, smaller version. And it was 3 in the morning. Wow. I've always wondered why they went to the garden at 3 in the morning. I always thought that was his way to hide his secret way to grow he grew the largest potatoes on this earth. I think my grandpa wanted his own secret recipe. You know what I'm trying to do. Secret recipe. I always did think that. He didn't want no one to find his special way how he grew huge potatoes. Oh, he could grow the biggest potatoes on this earth. He just had a way he had an act about it. I don't think it was part fertilizer, part hilly, part soil. I think a lot of it, he just knew how to do it. He had his own science. My grandpa Redden had his own science in growing the largest potatoes I've ever seen. I think he went up that early because he knew everybody else was in bed to do his secret way. And the reason why I strongly believe he did it that way, he wanted to be the provider of potatoes. That was his little earned ego, and I'm glad he kept it secret. Maybe I'm wrong, but I always thought, only one that knew how to do it was him and Grandma. I always wondered about that. If he had his own secret way to do it, because he wanted to provide potatoes. For us all, he did. He didn't want no one to take that special spot that he held. Oh, he could grow the biggest potatoes. That's what I miss. Huge potatoes. Oh, God. One potato would fill half the skillet. If that gives you any idea of the size of his homegrown potatoes. My grandma, every time she come over, now why she didn't give me and my sister much money, she didn't want feelings hurt. No, nobody knows this, all right? None of my cousins or nothing. I first want to say to all my cousins, she loved everybody. She loved all of her You know, all for grandkids. She really did. But my dad didn't make as much as my Uncle Clifton. My Uncle Cliff worked at Ford Motor Company. So every time my grandma Redden would visit us, she'd always give me and my sister $1. Now, $1 back in the 70s, that's a lot of money. Easily buy you a pop. She always, and she didn't want to hurt the other kids, even though my dad made less. She didn't want the other kids. I don't know. She had just her way, but she always gave me and my sister $1, always. And after their death, I kept that $1 for about a year. And I was thinking, if I lose that $1, it's going to kill me. So I end up. She would want me to spend it, so I spent it on a Pepsi. Do I wish I kept that $1? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. But I end up spending it because that's the way she would have wanted it. We miss them both. My nose is running, windy and walking, sneezing. But I can't say enough for my grandpa and grandma. We miss them very dearly. It's hard to believe it's been 34 years. 1980, November 29th, 1980. They're buried in LJ, Georgia, northern Georgia. We went down there for the funeral. Yeah, my grandpa's from Georgia. And he had a rough childhood. Boy, I never get him exploding on me one time over that. I lost my water. I was 11, 12 years old. I lost my water gun. And I pestered him, got on his nerves for about 30 minutes. He's in the garage. And he let me verbally have it. He says, "You can never forget what he said in that quote." And we're talking about 1974, 1975. I was, say, 11. Crying my eyes out. "Grandpa, somebody stole my water gun." You know, some of my cousins, you know, we was all kids. And after about 30 minutes, my grandpa couldn't take it no more. He just, I never will forget this. He exploded. And he said, in that quote, "You kids are lucky." He says, "Quit your whining." He says, "You don't know how lucky you are." He says, "You have parents." He said, "I never had a parent. I never had you know, they both died. I grew up with no parents. You kids don't know how lucky you got it." You know, I just basically got on his nerves. Well, for 10 minutes, then he told me how hard his orphan. For about 10 minutes, he told me I had to run a. How did he say it? A one blade. Remember, he said jackass. Of course, jackass is in the Bible. But he says I used to have to plow from daylight to dark. Well, he screamed that. A jackass that owned an old mule through the hardest ground. He said, "You get blisters on your hands." He said, "Me and Leland," his brother, you know, my uncle, great uncle. He said, "Me and Leland, and we got 2 cents a day. That's all they paid, and they didn't feed you, barely. Treated real bad." Anyway, he says, in that quote, "Me and Leland, we had to steal to survive." They had to steal food. They go to farmers' gardens, steal anything because they had to. They starved. He says, you know, this is just an impossible life. His mom, be my great grandma, my grandpa's mom and dad, his mom died from pneumonia, and his dad died, they said, from a tumor. I always thought maybe it was a bee sting, and he died from anaphylactic shock. When I get on that, when I'm gonna get on Ancestry.com and get me a membership, and I'll look up, because it's no doubt a record. I'm gonna look all that up. But she died from pneumonia, and he was orphaned from then on. He's probably orphaned. I'm guessing probably 6, 7 years old. He was orphaned, probably younger than that. But and my Uncle Leland, a week before he died, my Aunt Pearl said they sat on the porch. That's my grandpa's brother, was sitting on the porch, and out of the blue, my Aunt Pearl told me that, out of the blue, they sat in there, and my Uncle Leland stared straight ahead. And I quote, she quoted what he said. "Pearl, me and Lolan, we had it so rough when they was orphaned." And he stared straight ahead, just the hurt in his voice. A week later, he died from a heart attack, yeah. But he says, "Me and Lolan, we had it so rough as orphans, very rough." Today, you know, there's child labor laws. They didn't know what a child labor law was back then. But Well, life can be sad, can it? We love and miss you, Grandpa and Grandma, Lolan and Marjorie Redden.